Hello, I am Sharon Krone, Executive Director of the Make It Better Foundation, and welcome to our program, Family Law and Finance, Building a Family Office Successfully with a Blended Family, where we will explore how to build a foundation of best practices for success of a blended family office and put in place a strong infrastructure to support a family as it expands and contracts over lifetimes. Please send questions and comments through the chat at any time, and we will try to address them all. But also, please know that a video of this event will be sent to everyone who registered for today's event. It will be put into our MIB TV and on our YouTube channel and included in an article summarizing the top line advice and featured in an upcoming Better Letter email newsletter pushed out through our social networks. Enterprising families and those managing the proceeds from the sale through a family office face the challenges of connection and cohesion without the glue of an operating company. Divorces involving high net worth individuals, business owners, professionals, and executives can become extremely complicated and require expert knowledge and experience. Quite simply, family law and the financial implications of divorce, it's complicated. So how can blended families navigate the entanglements from divorce while building a family office that addresses a family's financial goals, yes, and sustains their common sense of purpose and shared vision? That's what we're here to explore today. With me are two pillars in their respective fields, authorities in the family law and family office space. Janet Boyle, founder and principal of Family Law Solutions. She holds a master's in taxation with superior expertise in the financial implications of divorce. And Andrew Keyt, founder and CEO of Generation 6 and author of an upcoming book, Reshaping Reality, Unlocking the Family Office's Potential by Addressing its Design Flaws. Our panel will share their vast experience and guidance and be heard, be informed, be guided for success through a myriad of obstacles and toward a goal of a successful family office with a common vision for the future. Welcome. Andrew,
Thanks,
you've been teaching on and consulting with enterprising families for 25 years now on succession, strategic planning, family conflict, communication, emergency management, transitions. Much has been shaped by the research you've conducted. In your chapter, though, in the Transformative Family Office in your upcoming new book, you write something I found captivates this. To create family cohesion and a sense of emotional ownership, a family must wrestle with what they see as the purpose of their wealth and realize their financial capital isn't the only form of capital they're putting out into the world. What happens in a family office when the focus is only on financial capital?
So it's one of the most common challenges to family offices is that they're often created with solely that financial purpose. And the end result often is that the family develops a sense of being a client of the family office rather than being the owners of the family office. And it puts the family into a really passive mentality in terms of just seeing themselves similarly to being the client of a bank. But the reality is a family office is a business entity unto itself. And the family has to cultivate a sense of ownership and responsibility for the long-term well-being of the family office, just like it does any other operating business. So in our experience, the families that sustain themselves across time are the ones that cultivate a sense of purpose and meaning to what they're doing with their wealth. And to do that, what we need to do is really focus on the development of our human capital, our intellectual capital, our relational capital as a family. And that may be through philanthropy. It may be through how we deploy our capital using social impact investing, but deciding kind of what impact do we want to have on the world beyond just producing better financial results. You know, it's that old saying that financial results are necessary for a business to live, but not a reason to live, right? So we want to cultivate a sense of purpose in the family, about what we want to do to deploy our capital. And in a blended family, that's even more complex because you're merging systems that have histories of their own, and creating a common sense of purpose with family is a unique and interesting challenge.
Mhm. Yeah, that actually is a powerful way of putting it, merging systems with histories. Um, I appreciate that. Janet, you've been listening and informing families on the complexities of business and finance in the family law space for over 3 decades, helping families prevent problems and avoid issues through some very hard times, especially as they're merging these systems. So, if family offices or corporate law firms, which is really, quite frankly, who wealthy blended families not yet at that family office level, they use these, but don't have them on staff necessarily and don't have that experience. They need to put in place strong infrastructure to support a family as it expands and contracts over time. What role does your firm play in these situations?
Our family, our law firm comes into play when there's events that occur. No matter the level of wealth, whether or not you're a family office or whether you're at a lower level of wealth where you have your corporate law firm, your wealth management advisors, when there's a marriage, whether it's a first marriage, a second marriage, whether there's children coming into the second marriage with a first marriage to cause a blended family, whether it's a death, a birth, within a marriage, outside of a marriage, whether it's a divorce. These family events that occur trigger the necessity of looking at what happens and what is necessary. I've heard it said that humans are inherently lazy. The example that was given when I listened to that was to look at Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley. When they played basketball, they were both fit and trim and, just a specimen of fitness. And within a couple of years after they played basketball, neither of them were fit or trim any longer. We do what we need to do, and the rest of the time we have a tendency to procrastinate. So what occurs so often is that you're going to get married and it's suggested to you, maybe I should have a prenup. And the couple says, well, we're in love. We'll work it out. There's no need for a prenup. Birth occurs and the couple says, well, there's no need to revisit the prenup, to revisit our estate plan. And, the procrastination can ultimately cause, really difficult problems. I just said revisit a prenup. And the audience is probably saying, revisit a prenup. I thought you did a prenup and then you put it in the drawer and you forget about it until there's a divorce or a death. And part of what you're going to hear from me throughout this as Andrew and I talk is, a prenup should really be a living document. As events occur, as the couple, grows together, as things happen, especially in families of wealth, as assets are accrued, as stock may change hands, as businesses may grow, as retirements may occur. As all these things happen, the prenup should be taken out of that drawer and looked at again. Why? And, there's two different reasons. In the event that a divorce ever does occur, you will have a much better chance of the prenup being found to be viable and enforceable if in fact you have looked at it and not just had it thrown in a drawer for all those years. Number two, because part of what I think you're going to hear Andrew and I say throughout this is having an engagement within the family, okay, and having communication within the family is the way that the family business and the family itself can be protected. What does my law firm do? My law firm will help you draft the proper and complex documents that are necessary at the various levels of wealth. And as the wealth grows, you're going to need more. So that is what we do, and that is what we have the ability to do. We have on staff. I have a tax degree, as Sharon pointed out. I have somebody coming on board who has an intellectual property master's. I have somebody with a trial techniques master's. We have all the tools to be able to help you navigate what can be very complex waters.
It definitely sounds complex, and yet we understand that what you're suggesting is that building a foundation of best practices on the front end and engaging them as living documents, revisiting them, positions families for best chance of success, especially blended families that change and contract and expand over time. Andrew, well, let's go back for a second, because we've been talking a little bit around this idea of cohesion. You talk about the importance of that. What do blended families do to build family cohesion?
So it's a really interesting challenge. So just to back up a little bit and give a little bit of context. So the research that myself and several of my colleagues have done has shown that the things that sustain family enterprises across time, again, financial success is necessary but not sufficient. To sustain a family enterprise across time, you have to build a sense of connection and cohesion and commitment to each other as family members, and build a common sense of purpose about where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish together. That is what provides the momentum and the glue that sustains a family enterprise across time. So when we talk about a family office is a family enterprise. And with a blended family, we have the unique challenge of, as we talked about, merging systems, right? And one of the things I like to say is that how we handle one ending impacts our next beginning. So as a blended family comes together, if we have unresolved issues from the previous relationships, the previous family configurations, that will make the merging and creation of a family office more complex. So all of this comes down to communication and connection and building of a relationship. Because the stronger our relationships, the stronger our level of trust, the greater our capacity to work through and solve the complex problems that we face when creating a family office. So it's not just thinking about structurally what we do, which is where we tend to lean because it gives us a lot of clarity. Structure gives us clarity. But if we don't work on the relational issues that support the structure, then no structure is going to work. So we have to be looking at what are we doing to build our relationships, to bring two family systems together and create a common future together, realizing that we both have distinct histories, but we're trying to create a common future.
Janet,
That's a very blended families have their difficulties, and the way that they become blended is because, as Andrew said, the ending of one and the beginning of another. And typically the way that one ends is through a divorce, and then the beginning is the blending of two families that probably had a divorce from two prior families. So you've got damage that has occurred through two prior endings, and now you're trying to blend two families together. And when there's an enterprise that is in existence, and one family that's merging into another family may have may be money that the other one may not. There may be resentments, there may be all of this, but how the prior marriages ended can become very, very, very important. And you have a combination here of legal and psychological and all of those issues together. Again, having, when you're starting the new beginnings, having a prenup that goes into effect is good. that when you're having the endings, how you conduct yourself within the divorce process is so important. And you do have, the divorce, there's different ways to have a divorce. You can have a highly contentious litigated divorce, or you can have a collaborative divorce, or you can have, where people have a prenup in the beginning where things are worked out, and you can have a very friendly, non-litigious divorce. And I've been involved in all of those types of cases. And, I'm a firm believer in starting friendly and then going, you ending however it needs to be ended. But these highly complex cases, need the highly complex answers. And, when you're trying to combine the two families together, it is a highly complex situation. And, the new beginnings is one situation, the ending is a different situation.
And there are
And
several examples, honestly, of beginnings and endings, right? So we've got marriages, births, deaths. And I imagine, we could also explore, and it's actually a question that's coming through the chat right now, what about the merge following a death in the family? Can you kind of elaborate on that and how that it might look different in cases of divorce?
I can give you I had a very different experience. I had a case where I had gotten a young woman divorced who had a young family, and this will, kind of play into what Andrew does. And she was very middle class and, 2 young children. And then she met somebody who was extremely wealthy. And, he had invented something, had great wealth. And so her and her young children were now into a highly wealthy family, and he had grown children. So now you have this blended family situation. And then he died. And now she became the widow, who was now had a great role in his company, with her children now having a potential interest upon his death, which was very unexpected. He was very young. And then his children, who were grown, with their mother, still being involved. And Andrew can speak to, I'm sure, examples of situations like that, where this was very unexpected, very unplanned, and not, I am sure, atypical.
So
Andrew?
in the case of in this scenario that you're describing, the blended family was in result of an unfortunate death. The situation I've heard you describe, Andrew, is blending could be, when we talked about merging systems, sometimes we're merging value systems, relationships to wealth or not. Can you elaborate a little bit on those dynamics?
Sure. Part of what Janet was talking about is a family where one part of the family were what I call financial immigrants. And perhaps the other branch of the family were kind of financial natives, in that they kind of grew up with wealth, or they've existed in an environment of wealth for some period of time. So those differences in experiences around wealth can be a friction point with a blended family. Is what are our values around wealth? What are how do we each use our wealth, and what's the example we set for our children around our use of wealth? And my experience has shown that the children react much more to how the parents set the example around wealth than what the parents say about their wealth. So cultivating this sense of purpose and talking about the differences that we have in perhaps our experiences of wealth is a really important piece, because the money brings up a lot of emotions for us. It may be for that family that suddenly is part of this hugely wealthy family, that may be emotionally overwhelming. I don't know how to deal with the complexity of all this. And they may need to kind of have this conversation about what do we need to learn? How do we need to grow? And as parents, you need to think about how are we talking to our next generation about wealth and presenting a unified front so that we're not creating confusion for the next generation about the wealth.
Mm-hmm. So in one sense, the way you're phrasing it, and Janet, I'd welcome your perspective on this. The vehicles or the instruments such as a prenup could be a defensive measure, but in some ways it seems like it's inviting an opportunity to become the vehicle to bring cohesion, to be a way for a couple or a family to say, you know, we are coming in this relationship from different perspectives. This opens up the dialogue to talk about those emotional
when framed
entanglements of wealth.
Yeah, when framed correctly, the conversation around the creation of legal documents can actually open up some really great space and structure to have a conversation about things that we might not talk about otherwise. And if we create legal documents absent the relational context, what we end up with is documents that are primarily defensive and may actually be difficult to live with as we move forward. So having this be a conversation in making sure that the documents start a healthy conversation around these issues rather than a defensive conversation is really important.
Yeah, Janet, go ahead.
It's very important, and this goes back to what I was saying, to have the conversation and have it repeatedly. You know, when a couple is going in, the worst prenups I've ever seen are those where someone just goes in and says, well, if there's a divorce, I want this many millions of dollars. Okay. That's not a prenup. Okay. That's, I don't know what that is. But you know, the ones where it is, I want to become a part of your life, and, you know, we're going to build this together. And, you know, where the moneyed person and the non-moneyed person are speaking about what the values are and where we're going. And one of the most successful ones I ever saw was, you know, I want to teach you about money. Okay. And I want to teach you how to invest. And what we're going to do is we're going to develop this system here. And my business is commercial real estate, and I'm going to give you an interest in my commercial properties. However, if there's a divorce, you're going to give it back to me because this is my business. But upon my death, I want you to keep it. Okay, this is my business. I want you to be a part of it. So there's that type of a partnership, of an interest together. You know, if we have children, here's how we're going to raise them. What are our goals for charity? You know, we want to give, we want to be, you know, philanthropic. You know, we're going to do this together. Those conversations should happen. You know, we're going to, you know, if when we buy a new property, you know, some protections also have to be there. You know, the divorce laws are very peculiar in Illinois. Items that are acquired during the marriage are presumed to be marital. So presume that you inherit stock, or you're given stock by, you know, your parent during the marriage. Now, it was anticipated at the time of the prenup, but you don't go back and redo that. You're going to have a fight on your hands in the event of a divorce. And, you know, so having this conversation when that stock transfer does occur, when the buy-sell agreement becomes a reality, you know, there's so many items that a naive person coming into a wealthy family does not comprehend. And having those conversations as time goes on to educate is just so helpful. You know, just for the sake of the marriage, if not for the sake of a divorce, or you know, integrating them in the event of a death also. So, you know, make these documents holistic living, you know, make them part of your life.
In the lack of, with the lack of clarity, we're increasing the likelihood that the emotion is going to drive the conversation. So having these conversations ahead of time and creating some level of clarity ahead of time, hopefully will reduce the level of emotionality when we have to enact some of these documents.
Yes.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that, Andrew.
Sure.
Yeah, I can imagine that probably isn't the first go-to conversation for a family that has already withered perhaps a passing of a significant family member, or a divorce of some sort that has set up, a new blended family, either through marriage or whatever, so on and so forth. So my guess is this isn't the go-to conversation. Anything, we're probably aware that tapping into those deeper dynamics have kind of a lot of energy and potential to kind of get out of hand, to your point. But what do you recommend families initiate to kind of bring that conversation to the forefront? Because my guess is it's not coming out at the dinner table or sitting around a campfire or even at, on a vacation. Can you illustrate that for us?
Sure. I think we have to be intentional about the frame we set for our conversations. So that's creating the right environment to have the conversations, making sure it's a safe environment where people can feel grounded, feel prepared, and ready to have some of these conversations. So also having conversations regularly so that we're not attempting to solve everything in one conversation. So regular conversations that are set aside from other conversations so that we're not merging 6 conversations in one conversation, right? So that we regularly set aside time to talk about these complex issues where we're tied together financially, and recognize that it's going to bring up some emotion and that we may not solve it in one conversation. Yes, you're absolutely right that some of these things will bring up emotions and we may tend to avoid them. But if we say that, and this is actually borne by the research, is that families that regularly set aside time to talk about their complex financial interactions with each other and commit to that over time are able to work through those things more effectively, because that's an investment in their relationships with each other. It's an investment in working out the natural differences that we have, right? That to expect that we're all going to instantly be on the same page in one conversation is naive. We have to invest time, energy, just as we invest time and energy in developing our financial capital. We have to develop time. We have to devote time, energy, and emotional energy to building our personal relationships. So again, the deeper the trust, the more connected we feel, the greater our capacity to work through and solve these issues.
Janet?
The patriarch passing, the patriarch remarrying is a difficult one. And oftentimes when the patriarch or the matriarch is widowed, okay, and they're going to remarry, and they're still in control of the wealth of the family, whether it's a family office or a business or whatever. I have had people come to me, the children come to me, and they're concerned because mom or dad is going to remarry. Be it that they're going to remarry somebody of their own age or somebody younger, or and there's a second set of children or whatever it may be, the fact situation, and mom or dad is refusing a prenup or refusing to have that conversation. And I've had the children come to me with, what can we do? The best way that I have seen to handle it is to go to a trusted advisor of mom or dad, or have the children do an intervention or whatever it may be. But again, the clarity, which seems to be the word of the day here, seems to, be the answer. And of course, if these conversations have taken place in the past, if the family does have that cohesion, it is easier. But, these are difficult conversations. And again, so often, an older person, being faced with the loneliness after the death of a, long-term spouse, this can be a difficult situation. But again, getting that prenup in place, gives that second generation, the younger generation, the security of knowing, that they are being protected also. And that is important. And again, then the blending of the new spouse into the family and her family into the family can take place once there is the trust. Okay. And that is what needs to be developed. And it can be done through the legal documents. Because in that case, you're worried about the death and the probate more often than the divorce, although the divorces, do happen, especially with people living longer, and gray divorces have become a big thing. It's the largest growing area of divorce.
So there's a two-step here. One, on the first and foremost, a foundation of clarity, communication, education that family is already engaging with. The second step is good infrastructure, such as your firm is bringing in kind of the documents and the instruments that keep things clear and on course and are revisited, refreshed, and reviewed over time. But my guess is, and I think you hinted at this, you preserve the integrity of your role, right? You're representing an individual, you're in a legal perspective, but you're reaching out to advisors to kind of create a dynamic or a space where communication can happen for everyone, and not view you as one agenda. There's somebody there who is supporting the family at large. How do you identify those folks? How do you work with that? And maybe, Andrew, this might be the space too for you to step in and say how you work with legal representation for the full benefit of a blended family.
Sure. Starting point for that is that to think that we should have all the answers without any support or advice is again kind of naive, and realize that there are people who've been through this with multiple families and have experience that they can share across multiple families. So having an advisory team that we trust is critical. And so that may include financial advisors, legal advisors. My role and my expertise is really the family process, the family communication, the family strategy. What is our strategy to create a unified and blended family that has a common sense of purpose to create and sustain an entity across time? So that requires the advisors to work together. So I'm not a legal expert. I would be scared to see any legal document that I would try to draft. So I need people like Janet in the conversation to help families understand what are the real legal risks, liabilities that we need to consider, that we need to talk through. So we need the financial advisors to know what's possible. I was on the phone with a family earlier this week who's really exploring the concept of creating a family office. And they have a really complex family in that there are about 60 family members across family branches with divorces, deaths, lots of different issues. But we were starting with the conversation about what's our why? Why do we want to do this? What do we want to accomplish together that we couldn't accomplish on our own? What's that common sense of purpose? And how does the family office how do we create a family office that's an expression of that, right? That is structured to both achieve our financial objectives, but also cultivate that common sense of purpose and the impact that we want to have in the world together.
Andrew, I want some example. I need a little more detail. So
Sure.
the common sense of purpose, let's say there's no longer an operating company. Perhaps that's where the assets were generated from the sale of that. What are some examples of common sense of purpose, especially as you're talking about 60 family members probably spread over multi-generations and states and value systems? What's that look like?
I'll give you 3 concrete examples of how a family might express a sense of purpose through the deployment of their financial assets. So one might be through philanthropy. What's the impact that we want to have from a philanthropic perspective with our wealth? Maybe that's addressing a disease, or one family that I'm familiar with has adopted a neighborhood, an underserved neighborhood in the city that they live in, and they devote their time, talents, and treasures to that neighborhood. So if any major projects need to happen in that neighborhood, they use their both their money and their human resources to help that. Second option or example is social impact investing. We've got investments that we're going to make through our family office. What values do we want to guide those investments? You know, the Rockefeller family just divested from all oil assets a few years ago. You know, a family that was built on the oil assets, but the next generation stepping into, we believe we have these values that we want to express through how we deploy our capital in the markets. So we have expectations for the social impact of our investments. And then the third example I would give is really buying a new business, using your capital to buy new businesses that you can continue your impact. Some family offices have a strategy of buying operating businesses and illustrating their values through operating those businesses, which they've done through the family business that started their family offices. So 3 concrete examples of how you can do that.
Thank you for that. Janet, I'm curious to know what some tips you could offer for a less disruptive process for your clients as they determine best outcomes in these scenarios, things that, you know, outcomes they may never have planned for.
You know, really the outcomes that they've never planned for are the things that they should revisit. And I mean, they really, I guess it really goes back to communication. And, you know, these items come up, and it's any family, you know, blended, wealthy, not wealthy. You know, we all hit these points in our lives where, you know, things happen. And, you know, you have a prenup, you have an agreement, you have a marriage, and all of a sudden there's something different. And you have to pivot. And, you know, it's just the way it is. And, you know, come back to your advisors again, figure out what you should change. You know, don't be afraid to redo things. You know, don't be afraid to revisit things. And in the event of a divorce, okay, which is what I primarily do and what I see every day, you know, don't be, you know, just get it done. Okay, come in, get it done. You know, the 2 sides need to come in and negotiate and get it done. If you fight, you fight. I mean, but, you know, revisiting your prenup, pay me $5,000, get your prenup revised, to put in a new provision that, you know, you met with Andrew, something, you know, was done within your business, come in, redo your prenup, pay a lawyer to do it, as opposed to litigate, pay $100,000 to have a fight and have some judge who has never seen you, never met you, knows nothing about you, is going to make a decision on your life. You know, that's my real heartfelt advice, you know, is to deal with issues as they come up, not wait until there is a breaking point in your marriage or a death in your family, and then have to deal with it and have to litigate it. That's not the time to address it. Address it when it's there in front of you.
So removing the stigma, right? These instruments, these documents have a can have a productive impact on a relationship, on the family dynamic on the front end. If they're not there, you work through those as succinctly as you can, and you leverage the opportunity for conversation going forward. Andrew, we've talked a little bit about preparing the next generation for these kinds of conversations. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us? What should we be doing or encouraging families to do to prepare next generation?
That parents often get very emotional around these issues regarding the next generation because there's a lot of fear about what is the impact of this wealth going to be on the next generation. I think parents often worry that the wealth is going to corrupt the next generation. And the research that we've looked at shows that actually wealthy families, the next generation, achieves at higher levels than their peers. They're often very responsible. And so some of those fears are unfounded. But as parents, there are things that we can do to actively help the next generation prepare for the responsibilities of wealth. There's some complexity in managing wealth, and it's a responsibility that we have to prepare the next generation for. It starts with really educating yourself about how do I experience wealth? What are my emotions around wealth? Because that's going to impact how I talk to my kids about wealth. So if I can understand my own approach to wealth, my own maybe emotions around wealth, it'll help that conversation. Second is engage at an age appropriate level in conversation. So you're not going to be talking to an 8-year-old about trusts and trustees but you can talk to them about budgeting, and you can talk to them about saving, and you can progressively build conversations with the next generation at an age appropriate level about wealth and the responsibility of wealth. And at the core, being a good parent, teaching about needs versus wants, setting limits, holding them accountable. One of the things that happens in a lot of wealthy families is we have the resource to solve problems that kind of make life easier. But sometimes we need those hurdles. The next generation needs those hurdles to develop the muscle, right? We need to have hurdles that the next generation has to overcome. So that's how they build their sense of self-esteem, their sense of identity. So I always kind of laugh when parents say, I don't want my kids to have to struggle with what I struggled with. Because if you're happy with who you are, like those struggles are a part of what made you who you are. So in wealthy families, sometimes we have to create the environment for some struggle for the next generation. But at the end of the day, my belief is that talking to the next generation about your values around money, and how that informs your decision making, the more you can make that transparent, the more it's not some black box that, what's happening behind the curtain and this is how these decisions are made. The more empowered the next generation is going to feel, the more responsible they're going to feel around wealth, and the less it's going to be a burden for them.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if we could layer over that this blended family element.
Mm-hmm.
Touched on disparity, perhaps different relationships with money. And Janet, you may have examples of having seen how families open the conversation to kind of equalize, if you will. One side children, the others, their children having different experiences and relationships and emotions around money. How does that become an intentional focus in these conversations without becoming kind of overly doing it? How do families approach that?
There's actually there's actually all kinds of help out there for blended families. Psychologists and different seminars and that, because it is a very difficult process, with the old Brady Bunch, his, hers, and ours. and that because it's as Andrew said before, it's the I think he called it I don't remember what the people who had come to it, the native and the immigrant, or that type of a process, and it can be difficult because mom might not understand what dad's kids are going through, and dad might not understand what mom's kids are going through, and this can cause a lot of tensions, not only between the children but also between the parents. And this is a very it is a process of merging the children and the families into a cohesive unit. I've seen examples where it's worked really well, and I've seen examples where it has just failed terribly. And I think getting professional help, and I know, my office knows counselors who specialize in this, and I'm sure Andrew has asked, has resources available to him too. Because early on, if you're going to try to blend a family together right from the beginning, when you're going to be getting married, start right from the beginning, from the beginning of the relationship, because you can't just throw people together and expect them. You see it in kindergarten when you put kids together. I mean, there's just, some kids like each other, some don't. Why do you think a family is just going to accept each other? So you do need to work on it, and it is a process. And adding in the wealth and the no wealth, or maybe it's two wealthy families, it doesn't make any difference. It's a process that you need professional help to deal with. And it does need, it is a process.
Thank you for that. Andrew, any additional comments on that topic?
Yeah, I think I could go back to one of my comments in the beginning, which is how we end things impacts our next beginning. So if we haven't mourned the losses that are inherent in whether it's a death of a previous partner or a divorce from a previous partner, if we haven't dealt with that loss, if we can't have empathy for that loss, it's going to make it harder for us to enter into this conversation about what are we creating with this new blended family. And so the parents have to provide leadership in those conversations. So the parents probably need to talk together about the differences and make sure that they're on the same page, and then create an empathic and safe environment to have these conversations. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry about this. It's okay to have different opinions and different values, but can we talk about that in a trusting environment and find areas of connection and commonality rather than just focusing on our differences? So, and that from a blended family perspective will be impacted about what are the ages of the kids. So understanding what stage of development is the family in. If we're talking about younger kids, it's a different conversation than when you're talking about teenagers who are trying to establish a sense of identity at a point when their foundation for their identity, their family, has split apart and are coming back together, versus adult children who already have identity and careers and are set more in some of their beliefs, etc. So those conversations are different. Understanding where we are, and to Janet's point, of we don't have to do this alone, right? And we can do this in a loving and empathic and caring way.
Thank you for that. I've taken away a few points here. Building a foundation of best practices for success helps the blended family. I think success of the business is correlated to the success of the family relationships and those outside, the outside partners that advise them. I think that's an important piece. And then finally, the stronger your relationships, the deeper the trust. It makes it easier to work through these complexities. There's quite a bit here. We could go on for a while, but I do appreciate the valuable conversation and insight you both have brought to from your various corners in this field. Thank you so much. And we are grateful for our audience. Please look for our communication with a link to this broadcast, as well as a summary article in a future edition of our Better Letter. Thank you and have a good afternoon.